everybody. Welcome, welcome. As if we couldn't have planned it better, here come the largest trucks that Gettysburg has to offer as we start a video here in town. It's Gettysburg 162, and you are with the American Battlefield Trust. We got some people walking around. We're gonna walk a little bit through town and check some stuff out, okay? I'm about to bring our guest on, but before we do, please share this with your friends. Check out more that we have to offer on battlefields.org. And let me just say that we have hit the town a few times during Gettysburg anniversaries, okay? And specifically last year, y'all told us you really liked when we walked down East High Street and Stratton Street and around to West High Street. Well, this time we're gonna focus a little bit more on Baltimore Street, maybe move over to Washington Street as well. Oh man, now we got the motorcycles here. So, with no further ado, because I don't mind if it gets caught up. Here's Tim Smith. He is the official Adams County historian. They do it on purpose. Hi, Tim. Here we go. Okay,
I love it.
I'm going to put you right on the spot here, okay? Because we got to get some stats going here. In 1863, about how many people lived in Gettysburg?
Well, about 2,400 people.
Good. We're looking for quick answers. What are we talking about in terms of the number of educational institutes of higher learning?
There are two institutes of higher learning, Gettysburg College and, of course, the Lutheran Theological Seminary.
How many churches?
It depends how you count, 7 or 8. One of the congregations meets in a public hall, a meeting hall, and they don't have their own separate building.
Was there gas lighting in town?
Yes. I think gas lights came to Gettysburg in 1861.
Was the railroad in town yet?
The railroad had come in 1858. And in May of 1859, I believe it was, we had our train station.
But it did not extend to the west yet?
No, but it ended in Gettysburg, yes.
How many banks?
There were 2 banks in town at the time of the battle.
All right, let us know whether Tim passed the town quiz. I think he did okay. Maybe someday you can give tours in town, but for now you're stuck with our videos,
that's
okay?
Right, that's right.
Dude, we got battle to talk about, we got civilians, we got structures to talk about. I would just say, take it away.
You know, I think it's interesting being in town, especially on July 1st. Of course, that's when there's heavy fighting in the streets of town. I think people are surprised to hear that about our town. I think they know that Fredericksburg became a battleground as a city in the Civil War, or, you know, maybe Vicksburg, but Gettysburg on July 1st, there's heavy fighting in the streets. And basically, the first day of the battle is fought north and west of the town, and when the Northern Army is driven back, some 20,000 Northern soldiers retreat through the town, and some 30,000 Southerners are chasing them. And perhaps 2,000 people, scared to death, are hiding in their cellars. So it's a scene of chaos and confusion from about 4 o'clock until about 6 o'clock on the evening of July 1st. And look, Abraham Lincoln, of course, 4 months after the battle, came down this very street in a procession leading to the cemetery where he gave the famous Gettysburg Address. A lot happening on Baltimore Street, and let's walk over here for a moment.
While we're walking over there, I want to say hello to some of our people. Here's JD from the History Underground following along, just like the history nerd he is. I see people from 11 different states. I see the UK and Poland. Welcome, everybody.
If you come to Gettysburg, or even if you get on Main Street Gettysburg's website, you can see we have wayside exhibits around the town that highlight the history of the town and the fighting here during the battle. And this one has a painting by Don Triani, which actually highlights a family in the town hiding in their cellar. And you can only imagine how scared these people were. And of course, that's why at our museum, Gettysburg Beyond the Battle, we have the Caught in the Crossfire experience. So basically, on July 1st, on Baltimore Street, if you lived north of the point we're standing, off to my right, you would be in the area where there were hospitals and people were just hiding in their cellars scared to death. And you might notice that to the south of us, or to my left, you can see the traffic, there's a hill. And we basically call this Baltimore Hill, because we're on Baltimore Street. And that hill kind of is the demarcation line between the area that the Confederate Army occupied during the battle and where there were hospitals during the battle, and the area of violent sharpshooter action at the edge of the town. On the other side of the hill and down that hill, that's where the Southern sharpshooters were. They were firing up at Northern soldiers on Cemetery Hill in the distance.
I guess the reason you're saying that is because the hill blocks the view, and therefore the shooting from one place to another.
That's right. So the bullets coming from Cemetery Hill by the Northern Army could only, hit the side of the hill or just over the rise of the hill. And so this was a safer area to be in on this section of the town. So let's continue on.
Yeah, we have to interrupt with this because there's somebody watching from Pleasanton, California, named after the Cavalry Corps commander.
Pleasanton.
Alfred Pleasanton. You can tell if it's him because it's Pleasanton and not Pleasanton. We've got people from Fredericksburg, Virginia, from Michigan, Rochester, New York. It's so great to be here with all y'all. Thank you. Tim?
I just wanted to point out, we did a whole video last year. Was it last year? On High Street, the highest street in town. And of course, the highest point in town is just beyond High Street. But the Gettysburg Presbyterian Church, which this church is a newer edifice, but this congregation started in the 1740s west of what would eventually be Gettysburg. And we have a couple plaques on it noting the fact that Abraham Lincoln attended services at the building that once stood here. And also a plaque, of course, the political rally he attended was on November 19th, 1863, 4 months after the battle. And then Dwight David Eisenhower was actually a member of this congregation. And also during the battle, the former building that stood here was used as a hospital by Buford's Cavalry Division.
Well, let me break in real quick, Tim, just to point out that our friend JD from the History Underground, big meat eater, just so you know, walks the walk, man. This guy's a history nerd. He's in it just because he loves it, but he has a popular channel called the History Underground. Check it out. I think you're going to like what he has to offer. And here he is entering the Super Chat supporting this. You are welcome to emulate JD and enter the Super Chat and make us a donation, but if not, we hope you're enjoying it either way. Tim?
You know, there's about 100 different monuments, markers, and tablets in the town of Gettysburg featuring local history and aspects of the battle you might not know about. And I do a regular feature on my page, on my YouTube channel, about the markers and monuments and tablets in the town. And this is one that's rarely visited, and it was on a tablet that used to stand in front of the original church, which was torn down sometimes. The church at this site was built in 1842. It was torn down in the 1960s to make room for this more modern church. But we still have the plaque for the hospital of the Cavalry Corps at this location.
And if I may, Tim mentioned his YouTube channel there. I assume he's talking about the Adams County Historical Society's YouTube. He's on a lot. He has a famous thing called Monuments Monday and Q&A, but it might be Gettysburg history before long. We'll see how these entities interact with one another as one's an umbrella for the other.
Across the street is the Prince of Peace Church. Now that was David McCreary's house at the time of the battle, and a guy named Albertus McCreary lived there. He was 15 years old, and I think it was in 1909 he left a really good account of the fighting that took place around his house. And so let's continue on. You can check that out. But you can see there's a Presbyterian Church marker here that actually shows a picture of the church that stood here at the time of the battle, which is again built in 1842. It replaced, there was another church that was built in 1817 on the other side of town, and it replaced one from the 1740s that was outside of town. So it's a local congregation with a rich history. I should point out, although that turret on the front of that building is not Civil War period, it's a more modern feature. The building there is John Houck's residence at the time of the battle. And of course, what did John Houck own?
Oh, did you ask me the question, Tim? Houck's Ridge, emanating from Devil's Den.
Of course, he's the owner of Devil's Den at the time of the battle, which
Hey, Tim, let me jump
really
in
like.
real quick to say hello to a fellow extrovert. This one, an extrovert Paints, has entered the Super Chat. Thank you so much, and we appreciate your support in helping us to do these things. I see Warhawk is on. I see Houston, Texas. A few more from California. Wisconsin is the latest. Keep it up, Tim.
Of course, across the street is the museum, the Gettysburg Museum of History, friends of ours who have been featured in a couple videos on the site. And of course, that's a free museum if you get an opportunity to visit that. This alley we're crossing here is Wall Alley.
Wall Alley.
And it's called that because of the wall of the county jail that was down here at the time of the battle. But I want to point out, this is the original southern boundary of James Gettys's town and his original 210 town lots, laid out in 1786.
Tim, how'd you pronounce that?
Gettys. James.
So you pronounced it
Gettys.
correctly, unlike this guy over here.
He means me. So let's just do it real quick. I mean, that's Kris White behind the camera, in case you didn't know there. It's properly pronounced Gettysburg, and no matter how many times we say it, people tend to want to call it Gettysburg. I know that I say it wrong, but I like the way it sounds. I'm used to it, and Tim seems to be coming around to the proper pronunciation.
Yeah, to me, it's no big deal. People pronounce things the way they want to pronounce them.
Oh, some of us get eviscerated in the YouTube comments.
Oh, you're going to get eviscerated on this one, I'm sure. I'm just waiting. I don't see it yet.
Oh, I'm bringing it on.
So these lots, the buildings down here would not be as old as the original buildings behind us in the center of the town. But these lots were laid out by 1800 and then farther down by Alexander Dobbin by like 1806. So some of these buildings are old as well. Here's some friends of mine who've just renovated their house. We should look in his window here.
This is you're getting to know
So
the real Tim
here's some
Smith
people
now. This
from
is
New
him.
York that wanted to move to Gettysburg, bought a historic house, and are in the process of renovating the historic house, and they are sparing no expense. I'm incredibly impressed by their work.
Well, not only, wow, that was decidedly not creepy. Now, you're with the American Battlefield Trust. We're on Baltimore Street in Gettysburg. Thanks for joining us. Make sure you share this with your friends. Maybe we can get 1,000 people again like we did earlier. I want to say that not everybody is hating on Kris. I heard a go Kris over there. And get this, somebody just entered the Super Chat. That is Charlie T, who said he is standing at the spot of where the 6th Corps was 162 years ago today. So that sounds like Manchester, Maryland or something like that. Would that be, this is the first. Weren't they around Manchester on the first? So thank you for your support there. I've already gotten that one. And who else do we have? Civil War Man. Man, we've got some good names, from Ghost of Dan Sickles' Leg to An Extrovert Paints. Thank you. And we will see Carol Reardon before long. All sorts of stuff going on here. One thing you haven't covered yet, Tim, is that you can see with pretty good certainty that this is a Civil War building because it says Civil War building, July of 1863.
Around the time of the centennial of the Civil War, the Gettysburg Civil War Roundtable featured or decided to start this plaque program. And I think by 1966, they had placed a bunch of them around the town, marking buildings that were here at the time of the battle. So it really makes it easy. You can see the building, the plaques, and you can know if that building was there or not. Because a lot of the buildings were built right after the battle or, right before the battle. I just wanted to point out here where we're standing, just behind those buildings across the street, there's a rise of ground. That is the highest point in the borough of Gettysburg, just over there.
Very cool. I like.
Okay, so now just below that, I wanted to point out there.
Hold on, Tim. Kris is going to try to zoom over there. His craft is done. Continue, sir.
Okay. I think you turned it up. So if you look across the street, the house there, 245, 243, that was owned by the Rowe family, and Jeremiah Rowe and his wife ran a store there at the time of the battle. We get this great account, I believe it's from the 107th Ohio, where during the battle, as they're coming through town, a guy stops at the store and he buys a pie from Mrs. Rowe, but she doesn't have the proper amount of change. So she tells him to pay for it when he comes back through town. Of course, that unit came through town in a hurry during the retreat on July 1st. And in 1888, 25 years later, during the anniversary of the battle, he stops at her house. She actually had moved, tracks her down, and pays her for the pie that he took during the battle. I think that's awesome. Let's continue on.
Sarah Bierle jumping in here. Gary's been waylaid for a moment, but just looking at the comments, thank you for the super chats and for all the places you're joining us from. I'm seeing Fredericksburg. I see a super chat from Faye Boggs.
That's
another
one.
We have Sweden checking in. Gary, looks like you're back, so I'm going to hand the microphone back.
Cool, and I'm going to hand it over to Tim Smith.
So here we are at the Jenny Wade birthplace. So you might know if you come to Gettysburg, Jenny Wade is a big deal in our town. This is the Jenny Wade birthplace. There's a marker on the house she lived at the time of the battle, and there's a marker, of course, in a museum at the place where she was killed during the battle. Jenny Wade was one of 30 civilian casualties here at the battle, but she was the only civilian to be killed during the fighting. So the only civilian fatality during the battle. She was 20 years old. You can see she was born on May 21st, 1843, in this very house that was marked with a plaque by her sister, Georgia Wade McClellan. And of course, it was at her sister's house, where her rental facility, where she died on July 3rd, 1863, in this violent sharpshooter action at the edge of the town.
I've got two related things for you then. Could you settle this for us, Tim? Do we 1,100% know where the shot that killed her came from?
Well, you know, recently there's been a new research by the University of West Virginia, and they have a pretty good idea of where the bullet must have come from, but we don't know the exact spot. I think we'd, you know, that is a question that's going to always be unsettled.
Your mic's a little too close, I'm told. We're told from by the voice of God away. That might be too far. How about right there? Probably means mine is too close,
too. It's only when the trucks
the cars come.
It
sounds pretty good from what I've heard. I also see some more super chats. Thank you to Uber Mix for a particularly generous one. A second one, as Sarah said, from Faye Boggs. Here's a question I have. You've been talking about the sharpshooter action. Is there any hand-to-hand fighting in Gettysburg?
Well, during the battle, as the Southern Army over in the town, thousands of Union soldiers were captured in the fighting. So yes. Depending on where you are in the town or where things occurred in the town, there is fighting in the streets. And so a lot of that, like on High Street, there was a fight between, I think it's the 14th North Carolina and the 150th Pennsylvania Bucktails, in which they capture one of the regimental flags in the street fighting. Cool. So, I mean, you know, there's been very little written about the street fighting. You could read a chapter about it in Dave Martin's book on the first day, or on Harry Fonce's book on the first day. There was a blue and gray article written by Dave Martin about it, but really it's sporadic fighting, and it's really hard and chaotic to understand, really difficult to understand.
Cool, good, thanks for that here. My friend from Quebec has said hello, which is pretty cool. And we've got someone auf Deutschland as well. And some said it's a little hard to hear. Yeah, man, I mean, we are in town.
It's too loud, now it's too soft.
Yeah, it's hard to get right with trucks and Harleys coming by. Turn your mics up or down as you got to go. We got people waving to us, people saying hello. Let's go a little bit
Kris,
further
I wanted to point out one of the coolest things, I think, here in front of the Jenny Wade birthplace, if you get around in front of it without getting run over. Oh yeah, now you can go way out in the road, no cars. And it is a marker that is here, and it says 52M to B. And of course that stands for 52 miles to Baltimore. This marker actually replaced a marker that had been here since around the 1790s. We're not exactly sure when. And we have that original marker on display at the Gettysburg Beyond the Battle Museum. But what a cool marker. 52M to B.
Pretty cool, man. Let me, just while we're walking here too, they're open, we're not gonna go in, but we're about to pass by the Maryland Sutler. You know, if you're ever in town and you're not a reenactor, but you're curious what they have, go on into the Regimental Quartermaster or the Maryland Sutler, because you might find a hat or some boots or a dress or a shirt or a belt that you really like. You know, some people like to do Civil War chic while they're walking around battlefields and whatnot. You all know that sometimes I'll just wear the hat. So check out places like this while you're in town. There's a few of them, and it's always fun to go in.
I was going to say, I do have a photograph of these two houses from the 1880 that we're in front of. Oh, I should go over on this side so you can get a better view. And we do have a collection of photographs of the town and its buildings at the Adams County Historical Society. And it's, we don't have a lot of photographs at the time of the battle, but we have later photographs of these Civil War buildings.
I know we're headed south here, but I'm seeing some more stuff in the super chat as the motorcycles go by. Thanks to Paul Hannah. Glad we got a second Wisconsin fan. He's a reenactor as well. And our friend Amber Lass. Kris.
Amber.
Tim, I could have sworn that Amber Lass had people cut her lawn for her and do her dishes and stuff. But apparently she's mowing her lawn while she's listening. So hello to Amber.
I'm sure watching the people mow the lawn.
Yeah. Okay, that's what it is. That's what she meant by that, I guess. Good.
So I wanted to mention now that we're heading down Baltimore Hill. I think one of the neatest things I saw when I was young was there's a photograph taken by Henry Stewart of kids sleigh riding down Baltimore Hill, he mentions.
Yeah,
and so it's kind of a term that's been used to describe this because obviously this, leads to Baltimore. Now, we have a bunch of Civil War houses here in front of us. But you can see again, if you want to know if building was here at the time, it might be greatly renovated, but it'll have a Civil War plaque on it. There's one in particular I wanted to point out down here. And I should tell you that there is no map of the town at the time of the battle. We have an 1850 map of the borough of Gettysburg, and we have an 1872 map of the borough. We have the Warren map, but that's not really very to scale. So we argue about what buildings were here at the time of the battle and who lived in the buildings at the time of the battle, and there's no source that gives us that information. We have to put many sources together to come up with all the stories about this town. But this building on the left here, which has been greatly renovated, was a Methodist parsonage at the time of the battle. George Bergstresser was the minister, and during the fighting, a cannonball or explosive shell hit the house, and after the war a shell was placed in the house to mark where the shell hit during the battle. There are 9 buildings in the town today that have artillery shells sticking out of them from the battle, and we're not sure exactly how many shells are really from the battle or how many were just cemented in later by the people who lived there.
Are you suggesting that somebody's house would be worth more or more notable if they had a shell sticking out of it?
I'd pay more for one with a shell sticking out of it, I think. Now, you probably know, across the street, of course, we have the Shriver House, and we did a whole video on the Shriver House, which today is owned by the Adams County Historical Society. But let me show you this plaque down here. It highlights the fact that it was this area on Baltimore Street where there was a barricade built by the Southern Army during the battle. And according to Albertus McCreary, at one point, a Confederate artillery piece fired a couple rounds from this vicinity. But this across the street, of course, we have our Tilly Pierce house, and I mentioned the Shriver House over there. I actually pointed to the Tilly Pierce house when I said the Shriver House, but the Tilly Pierce house. And of course, Tilly Pierce is another one of the people in town that left us an account of the battle. She was 15 years old, and she wrote an awesome book on the battle. I'm getting a lot of hate on my Gettysburg page because I mentioned that I don't really like Tilly Pierce.
But he called her book awesome just now.
I
so
did. I called her book awesome then. It's just I don't like the way she badmouthed Jenny Wade.
Oh, yes,
Sweet,
Tim.
Innocent Jenny Wade.
Just real quick, Tim, let me just get in here real quick. Run the Ball has entered the super chat. Amber is trying to defend herself from the dangerous action of watching videos while she's having somebody else mow the lawn and things like that. We got Roy Webb here. We've got a video on the Shriver House is out now if you want to watch it. Innocent Potato, I believe, is the one I'm seeing from Maryland here. And my friend Wolf Tracks is on. Way to go, Wolf Tracks. Keep going, Tim.
Okay. So on the evening of the first day, the Southern Army captured the town of Gettysburg. Heavy fighting in the streets. The Northern Army fell back to Cemetery Hill, which according to my calculation, is now about 700 feet away. And this whole area of town became filled with Southern sharpshooters. So from the evening of the first day until the morning of July 4th, there was a violent sharpshooter action at the edge of the town. And on July 4th, the Northern Army reoccupied the town. But there were bullets flying everywhere. And across the street, if you look, there's a red brick building with some brown and black trim. That building is the Garlick house at the time of the battle. And Henry Garlick was a cabinet maker, and his wife and kids were in the building during the battle. There's a great account on July 1st where Anna Garlick, the daughter, says that she looked out in the street and Northern Army is retreating, and she said that she believed she could have crossed the street on the heads of the retreating soldiers. The mass of people was so great. They ended up spending the night of July 1st in the Shriver House basement in the unfinished bar area, I guess, so in the cellar. And then they came back and spent the 2nd and 3rd in their own house in the cellar. And it was, I think, on the afternoon of July 2nd, where Catherine Garlick went out to the backyard, somebody whispered to her, and behind some logs near the woodshed was hiding Union General Schimmelpfennig. How do you pronounce it?
I said Schimmelpfennig.
Okay.
That wasn't me whispering Schimmelpfennig.
Schimmelpfennig? That's one of those things we, obviously we have a problem with pronunciation of. But he hid in that, he on the retreat of the first day, he got cut off. He ended up in the backyard. He hid in a wood pile near the woodshed until the morning of July 4th, when the Union Army recaptured the town. And Catherine Garlick carried him out some bread and water. And it's amazing that an early tour guide story was that Schimmelpfennig was actually hiding in the hog pen behind the house. And again, it was just one of those derogatory statements that was aimed at the 11th Army Corps, who, were thought not to perform as well here as the other troops.
Let me just add, our friend Richard Houston, who's related to everybody on the planet, is related or claims relation to Tilly Pierce. Hey, man, how are you? Let's see, our friend Michael, it's tea time. He is in London, and he's enjoying the coverage of the town. A question for you, Tim, from Fireballer Mac 22. Did any African Americans live in Gettysburg or own property? Did any African Americans live here?
Excellent. So now we're on Baltimore Street. On the street just west of us, Washington Street, there's a large black community. 200 black citizens lived in Gettysburg according to the 1860 census, and another 200 in the area, the county, largely south of Gettysburg, but about 400 in Adams County. So let's continue on down the street. Another story told by Anna Garlick was that in the alley across the street from her house, the Confederate soldiers had built up on the south side of the alley a barricade. And she said that they would be behind the barricade and fire up at cemetery in front of us.
Wow.
And she said that the Confederates were doing something that she thought was a little, they didn't say Tim.
No, but they
So
said Jerry.
The Confederates were putting hats on sticks and holding the hat up over the barricade, drawing the attention of the sharpshooters on Cemetery Hill so they could see where they were and then jump up and shoot at them.
Go ahead.
I thought Roy Rogers invented that.
Yeah, no, is this idea of a barricade right down here in town new to anybody? I'd love to see it if you put it in the chat there, okay? Let me, speaking of the chat here, we've got Jim with a generous donation as well as somebody, XP Martin, gave a generous donation as well, and I hope he didn't mean it literally. Let's jump in our cars and crash this live chat. I hope he doesn't mean crash through this live chat, but thanks for your generosity, sir. As we walk through town, you're with the American Battlefield Trust. You're with Tim Smith, the official Adams County historian, as well. Kris White behind the camera, Sarah Bierle and I acting behind the camera as we just try to address chats and get a word in with Tim.
So this area we're walking by now was all a part of a tannery complex at the time of the Civil War, the Weinbrenner Tannery, and none of these houses that we're passing were here at the time of the battle. One of the post-war houses that had been condemned was recently torn down, and you might know that Main Street, Gettysburg, is building a downtown visitor center here to provide bathrooms and for tourists, and maybe a little historic displays and some literature about giving, walking tours of the town, which I think will be awesome. And you can contact their website and learn more about it. But the Weinbrenner Tannery was on our left. Up to the right is the Rupp's Tannery. Harvey Sweeney across the street ran a butchering business. He had a slaughterhouse back there, and up on the left there was a brick making enterprise. So this area south on Baltimore Street was well known as an industrial area. You can only imagine what it smelled like with the tanneries here at the time of the Civil War. And I guess we're going to go down South Street, but you want to go over here for a moment, Gary? The Weinbrenner house that stood at the time of the battle, the people that owned the tannery, which is just north of it, still stands. And of course, it's Mr. G's old-fashioned homemade ice cream, and one of the more popular sites in town. You can see the line of people for ice cream.
And Tim and the American Battlefield Trust reap no benefit from promoting Mr. G's or the Maryland Sutler or the Shriver House or anything like that. Well, Tim might get a little from the Shriver House.
Yeah.
But we're just trying to show you the town of Gettysburg while we're here, both new and old. It's great to see so many people here on the chat. Thanks to Grant for your notoriety as generosity as well. Tim, somebody made the assumption that you simply like John Burns more than Jenny Wade. Is that true, and why?
I don't think I like John Burns either. I wrote a book about him, but I certainly didn't write it because I liked him. And I don't like him because he criticized Jenny Wade, too.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Yes.
Okay, good. Keep
so
going.
There are two trees here, if Kris wants to look up. There's a tree right here, a sycamore tree, and there's a tree just down there. And these two trees were here at the time of the battle. So I thought I'd mention that for the witness tree people. The only two trees I know anywhere in this area that were here at the time, until I see more photographic evidence.
Good.
Across the street is, of course, the Farnsworth House, we call it. But this was Harvey Sweeney's house at the time of the battle. And no doubt that that window up there was, Southern sharpshooters were in there, like the same as the Shriver House, and the buildings at the edge of the town, and the Weinbrenner porch. And there's a couple buildings just south of us where there definitely were sharpshooters during the battle. And across the street there are modern buildings where Rupp's Tannery was, and undoubtedly the bullet that killed Jenny Wade came from somewhere on the west side of Baltimore Street down in this area of town. Exactly where, we will never know, but it definitely came from somewhere down in this area of the Farnsworth house.
Let me just add, Tim is going to pick our path to or around or through the Farnsworth house while we do. Thanks to Jeff Hanka for supporting us. For anybody who thinks that, wow, look at these guys fundraising while they're going through town, the American Battlefield Trust is a fundraising organization. We only save battlefields and educate the public because of our members and supporters help us do so. So please keep that in mind. That's one of the reasons we're able to do this. Tim, where are we and what are we walking through here?
So again, now we're on the west side of Baltimore Street, and this is the Farnsworth house. Oh, you just want to cut through?
Well, it's up to you.
Okay, we'll go through. And people are enjoying their lunch. Here, get Audrey.
Oh, Tim might have a connection with this place, so he would reap benefit from this. So we're not going to push it too hard.
So, I think it's interesting that when you're on the battlefield, obviously, the National Park Service owns a lot of property. But in the town of Gettysburg, where there's heavy fighting on the first day of the battle, it's private property and private enterprises. And somewhat our, preservation efforts are due to, private people who own the property. So we try to encourage the private property owner to like and learn history about their site.
Good. Before we move on, and I think we're about to get hit with some rain soon, so maybe we'll make it to where we're going, but I just want to say we're not going in there now, but through this door is the greatest in-town assembly of Gettysburg movie memorabilia. There are uniforms and hats and other things that were actually in the movie, and they're constantly showing the Gettysburg movie if you ever want to see it. So we'll keep it mysterious for now, but if you ever want to see it, it is the biggest collection of that stuff in town, and this was the hangout during the movie shooting in 1992. And,
American Battlefield Trust has done a whole series of videos on the making of the movie Gettysburg, which, for Civil War buffs is one of the favorites of Civil War movies. So this area back here where there's a Farnsworth House, a parking lot, there would be the slaughterhouse of Harvey Sweeney at the time.
Wow.
And, it's hard to imagine, but from this point towards Cemetery Hill in the distance, there were virtually no houses. This whole area was open, and there was a stream bed that went through the middle of this area, and Confederate sharpshooters were also in the stream bed. We tend not to understand or not to realize that there was also heavy fighting out along the open fields, and it would be these troops that were fighting along, skirmishing with the troops at the base of Cemetery Hill in the Union Army of the 11th Army Corps. So this is South Street, and of course it's called that because, at one time it was the southernmost street in the town. It was an alley at the time of the battle, and we're walking from South Street over to Washington Street. And again, Washington Street is the street where a large portion of Gettysburg's black community lived. That's just the way it had worked out. And this area we're walking through was originally part of Alexander Dobbin's property. And he, like James Geddes, had laid out town lots and offered them for sale. And then later, a guy named Thomas Craig Miller, who eventually purchased the Dobbin house, sold properties. And Thaddeus Stevens and a guy named Dr. David Gilbert were largely responsible for giving black citizens the opportunity to buy property along the street. And there was another guy named Thomas Cooper. But at that time, none of the black residents lived in the center of the town or near the square. They were relegated to owning property at the southern and western edge of the town.
Well, let me just add here that Bill has done the impossible. He has, in the chat, spelled my name correctly, Kris's first name correctly, and Sarah's last name correctly. So way to go, Bill Brenneman. My greatest compliments. I think I've just seen our fourth person watching from the UK. Hello, Ruth. You're causing quite a stir up there with people saying hello. And we've got Nevada, and we've got so much else. And our good friend, George or Jorge Martin Paez, who we see from time to time on here. Tim, take it away. We're about to finish this thing up with the 908 people watching. Thanks so much for joining us with the American Battlefield Trust.
I was just going to say that I misspell Kris's name in our text only because that autocorrect keeps changing it.
Good. So now, Tim, set this up for our closing shot here.
Here we are at the southwestern edge of the town at the time of the battle. And Cemetery Hill is not far away, straight ahead of us. And there is a house across the street from us at the moment. It's the Jacob Stock house at the time of the battle. Jacob Stock is a German immigrant. And Stock and his family lived here at the time of the battle. And for whatever reason, his house became filled with Southern sharpshooters, most likely because of the window. And I don't know if you can see, because of the way of the construction style there, that is the same construction style as the Farnsworth house on Baltimore Street with the offset window and the 1.5-story back building that used to have also. But this building is greatly damaged during the battle, and you might think it looks greatly damaged, but we actually have another photograph of it that shows it even more damaged here. Let me get it.
Let me just, while he's pulling that out, let me just notice that Kris was focusing in on some of those bullet holes. Now, we never knew about this photo until our good friend Ron was able to get it at auction. Look at the damage to the house, also known as the Swan Hotel at the time. Just how much more substantial it was. Not just bullet damage, we're talking about serious shell damage, literally apparently trying to, fight back against any snipers who would be in that upper window. I also want to note that, no, I'll wait for the end, Tim, keep going.
No, I was going to mention, since you brought it up, that, we'd heard that Jacob Stock runs a sort of a hotel out of this place, and we had family history that said it was a Swan Hotel, but then sure enough, in that photograph, there's a sign that on the front of the house that says the Swan. So Union artillery pieces on Cemetery Hill, not far away, according to the count, rolled down, I think it was an Ohio artillery unit, this is according to the 55th Ohio Infantry, on the base of Cemetery, and just fired some artillery rounds into the side of the house. And that caused the damage to the building during the battle. And that photograph that we just saw must have been taken like in late October, early November, 1863, and that building is still severely damaged.
Yeah.
Maybe, just like today, insurance adjusters take a long time to deal with these problems.
Maybe. So let me just thank Bill's Place, a trust member, for your support here. Let me say that Owen Black is offering up for free. Somebody going to have his reservation for 7 people at the Dobbin House tonight. And I think with that comment, that brings us near the end of our discussion here. But let me offer up to Kris or Tim or Sarah to see if they have anything else to add.
I would just say that also behind this area is Lincoln Cemetery, where a lot of the black community is buried. And the Adams County Historical Society, under its umbrella, Gettysburg History, is soon to be converting one of these historic houses on Washington Street into a Black History Museum.
That'll be just great. We could do this for 2 or 3 days straight with this guy, just talking about Gettysburg. For those of you who didn't hear us at the beginning, check out our previous lives. Last year, we did the other side of Baltimore Street near High Street and really covered a lot of cool stuff. You told us you liked it, so we came back and we've done a little bit more of the town this time. You could look at previous years and other videos where we've covered this stuff. Please don't assume that the one video or the one day that you might watch, that's everything. You can search our YouTube or Facebook page and see some of the things you want to know. On behalf of Kris behind the camera and Sarah and the rain that's coming down, and especially Tim Smith and all you for watching and who donated during this, we thank you so much for all your support of battlefield education, inspiration, restoration, and preservation.